And now, judges, would you please introduce yourselves?
And one of the interesting things is, I mean, when you get to do this often enough, you get to know Tahoma. I know where they're from. And part of the reason that is one of the things you'll find out, my name's Lindsay Draper. I'm here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, retired from the juvenile court bench. But every time I end up judging a Washington team, I tell them that I'm an alum of Seattle University. So I have a certain affinity with the state of Washington.
Great. Hi, my name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I handle federal government contract disputes around the country, and I'm in Maine.
Steve, you're muted.
Get this right, yeah. I'm Steve Franzik, retired professor of political science from the U.S. Naval Academy.
And could you introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mathieu Chabot. Mon père devient de France et je suis un citoyen de tous les deux de France et les États-Unis. Hello, my name is Mathieu Chabot. My father comes from France. I am a citizen of both France and the United States.
Hello, my name is Deborah Damanda and my parents immigrated from Mongolia.
你好啊，我係林正，屋企人嚟自香港，我喺香港住咗15年，喺美國住咗2年。Hello, name's Isaac Lam. I've lived in Hong Kong for 15 years and in America for the past 2. And on behalf of Unit 6, our advisor, Gretchen Wolfen, and Tahoma High School, we thank you for judging us today.
Okay, we're going to do the first question out of Unit 6. I can't help but tell you all that I was starting to think we're having technical difficulties, and then you explained what was happening. Disband your deluded followers. Should you attempt to fire upon...
You froze.
Yes, he has frozen. Would a different judge like to pick up on reading
I'd be
that?
happy to read it until we get Lindsay back. Disband your deluded followers. Should you attempt to fire upon the troops of government, the consequences might be fatal to many of your men, the least guilty. What useful purposes, if any, have rebellions served throughout American history? Do the events of January 6, 2021 at the US Capitol constitute a rebellion? Why or why not? Are there rebellions in the world today that are justified? Why or why not? What do you think we should do before I send them on their way? Lindsay's going to need to hear this.
Yeah, I asked him to try rejoining, so let's give him just a second to do that. That would be important for him to hear this portion.
Thankfully, we have time at the end of the half hour. Sorry, kids, just when the worst moment, huh?
What is?
Yeah.
I'm going to try calling Lindsay as well, just to make sure his internet hasn't cut out entirely. If you could give me a minute.
Yeah. If he has, I'm sure we can find another judge to sit in. Mark, there's Mark Gage. Thank you. Mark, we've just lost Lindsay Draper.
Okay. Not in a breakout room, but lost.
Oh yeah, I was just about to call him. Are you delivering a message for him, or should I go ahead and call Lindsay?
Oh, feel free to call.
Okay.
Yep. No, I was just seeing if I could help.
We just read the question and are turning to the kids to speak away.
I see.
The fun of Zoom.
Well, we might find we go into lunch a little bit, but at least we have the next hour that we can accommodate or adjust accordingly, kids. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Oh, yeah. Have a little break. Water? Little technical difficulties. You guys come on in. We lost the judge.
He's trying to log in by telephone, so we're expecting him
okay.
shortly. Yes, I had to get off the phone so that he could go back to trying logging in by phone. So let's try to give him another minute here.
Thanks for figuring that out, Elisa. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah, I guess he talked to Rebecca already. So I was just gonna text Rebecca to make sure she has a backup if there are any further issues.
Okay.
We do have lunch coming up, so we've got a little more time that we can manage this hearing.
Okay.
And those poor kids, you're just dying over there.
Oh, no, this is not a big deal, right, you guys?
Just think, one of you is going to think of just the perfect thing that you wanted to say that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't have this time.
I agree with you. I was going to ask Mark how it's going as far as technology, but hopefully this is one of the
Yeah, so far so good, except I'm sorry, guys, about this issue.
That's okay.
That's all right. Yeah.
Pretty flexible. It's that Washington State thing, right?
That's right. You guys can handle it. Lisa, I'm going to get on the phone with Rebecca, so I'll at least be connected to her, and I can pass along anything.
That's fine. Okay, Lindsay's
Oh, there he is.
in the waiting room. Oh, do
He's
you see
there?
him?
Okay, great.
In the waiting room, yeah.
He's in the waiting room, and I'm admitting him. Oh wait. I'm trying to admit him, so he should be coming in somehow.
There's two Lindsays in the waiting room.
Yeah.
There he is.
There.
Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay, you can see
picture
him.
and all. Fantastic.
All right.
Great. Okay. Well, Lindsay, I've read the question. Can you wait a minute?
Can he hear us yet?
Not yet. Just a minute. He's connecting.
Cheers. They had just read the question. Oh, so yeah, they have. So they did intros. They know a question is being asked, and then he froze.
He hasn't connected to audio yet.
Do you want to
Yeah,
admit?
sorry about that.
Yeah, so he's. Do you want to
Mark,
admit the other?
I did, and it says that one's joining. You can see that as well, Mark, right?
Yeah. Well, on my end it said he was just in there, but not that matters.
I have the two Lindsays. I have the one in the waiting room that says joining, and the one that's with us with his video off.
Okay. Maybe I should call Lindsay too. Might be a good idea.
Yeah, he is on his phone, so let's see.
Oh, he's joining on his phone.
Yes.
There he is.
Now, can he hear us?
We'll see.
I do not hear you, Lindsay. Maybe he's getting earbuds.
Yeah.
Can't hear us.
Can you hear us? Oh.
Now it's connecting. Oh, he didn't connect.
He
can't hear
us. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mark, do you have any recommendations?
I will know, but I will ask Rebecca what their preference is. She's in there with Bob.
Okay.
Did he say what happened with his computer?
He said the internet is out, so that's why he's calling in by phone, right?
And Lindsay, you might have more. I don't know if you can hear me, Lindsay. He can't.
He can't hear. He might. I don't know if he'll see chat, but is there something you want me to put in chat to him?
Well, I was just saying.
I have no idea on the phone.
Yeah, I was just saying he'd have more success if he just calls in on his phone rather than trying to access the video.
That's what he, well.
It looks like he's, on this device. Maybe that's what he's doing.
Oh, that might be why we had the two Lindsays at one point.
Right.
Why don't you try and admit the other Lindsay?
Well, he's not.
It's not back yet.
Hmm.
I did try to admit the other Lindsay earlier. Yes.
Yeah, fun yet?
Very fun. Very fun. Very exciting.
Sure. Goes in the books, right? No, not happening.
I don't think that a judge would be able to lose internet connection in person.
Right.
That's the
Rather than go to lunch, I said,
Not anymore.
no, maybe that's some water. Is this yours here? Debbie, you want water? Better. Yeah, we might have a better time.
All right, guys, please just continue without Lindsay, unfortunately.
Okay.
Should we just have the two of us and then we'll count
Yes,
the 2/3 vote as the whole? We'll just average our decisions and then Lindsay will be plugged in?
Yeah, Lindsay will unfortunately just have to miss this entire one. So I think as far as your question about scoring, I think that's how it works.
Like just
Okay,
score
great.
as they normally would score, right?
Yeah, just score as you normally would
Yes.
score. That's right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right.
Bye, all.
Somehow
Good luck.
a third will be added to the number.
I'm sorry.
So, I mean, we don't want this school to miss the points from Lindsay. So we'll just give Lindsay the average of mine and
Average.
Steve's
Yes, I believe that's how it works.
to create his own. Okay, great.
Right.
Create a third judge's score.
Great. Okay. Are you all okay with that, guys?
Yes.
Figure that out? Okay, great.
Hi,
All
guys.
right.
Good
Well,
luck.
I've read you the question. Steve, you want to lead this or shall I? I'll jump on in Lindsay's absence. You've told us who you are. We've learned all of your wonderful languages, and why don't you just go ahead? Go for it.
An insurrection, whatever may be its immediate cause,
Eventually endangers all governments.
Alexander Hamilton.
Rebellions are not foreign to the history of the United States. While the American Revolution was an example of a successful rebellion, subsequent rebellions have not achieved their intended purposes, but have pressured unresponsive governments into change. Rebellions are justified when natural rights are violated.
For example, the primary purpose of Shays' Rebellion was to lower taxes in Massachusetts while increasing political power for farmers. While Shays' Rebellion did not achieve those purposes, it showcased the need for a stronger federal government during the drafting of the Constitution.
Additionally, Nat Turner's rebellion led to harsher restrictions on literacy and religious practices for slaves, while the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia led to Unions having to shift to less violent tactics.
The Wounded Knee occupation in 1973, conducted by the American Indian Movement, resulted in 71 days and 2 deaths.
these rebellions all represented a desire to renegotiate the social contract, which delineates how the people relate to the government. To this end, They may have served a useful purpose in pressuring an otherwise unresponsive government into changes, but their outcomes have not met the original intent.
The events of January 6, 2021 constituted a rebellion due to its violence, resistance, and opposition against an established government. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 2383, rebellions are defined as the refusal of obedience and open resistance against the orders of an established authority.
The actions of January 6 started off as a protest against election results and a show of support for former President Donald Trump. However, this protest became an insurrection when an armed group of rebels stormed the United States Capitol building, falsely believing that they could pressure former Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election.
Some argued that the events at January 6 were a form of civil disobedience, similar to the civil rights movement. However, the main difference between civil disobedience and rebellion lies in the escalated violent actions of resistance in the group.
On January 6, these rebels threatened the safety of our democracy, representatives, and leaders with no intention of facing legal consequences.
In contrast, during the civil rights movement, several leaders abided by civil disobedience and chose nonviolence as a tool to dismantle racial segregation. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. used passive resistance, boycotts, and peaceful protests to achieve the movement's goals.
While other leaders advocated for a more militant approach for fighting for equal rights, such as Malcolm X, who said the American Negro must fight back in self-defense whenever he's being unjustly or unlawfully attacked.
Therefore, rather than being an act of civil disobedience, we can see that the events of January 6 constituted a rebellion.
Modern rebellions can be legitimized for a myriad of reasons, including the perceived illegitimacy of government and, according to John Stuart Mill in On Liberty, the revocation of liberties and rights.
The Declaration of Independence noted that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. The current situation in Myanmar is a perfect example of a legitimate rebellion. Thousands of Burmese are taking arms to dispose a military junta that overthrew democratically elected officials.
Similarly, the Kurdish rebellion in Turkey, spearheaded by the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as PKK, is also justified for the same reason. The PKK holds that the Turkish government, having long oppressed the Kurdish people, are as illegitimate and now demands increased autonomy from Turkey.
In Kazakhstan, protests stemming from an increase in oil prices quickly has evolved into riots fighting to end the authoritarian rule of the government, as well as lower corruption and economic inequality. However, the government responded with force, swiftly ending the rebellion.
Rebellions have played a key role in securing the rights and liberties of world citizens, regardless of race, class, or gender.
The tree of liberty must be refreshed
from time to time with the blood
of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you. So you, it's not time, right? So you've described the January 6th proceedings, and do you think that there's any, what do you think of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? Do you think it's implicated with the January 6th events?
Section 3, which prohibits those that participated in a rebellion or support a rebellion from running for federal office, does have definite role to play in the January 6th proceedings. However, in recent challenges to unseat Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Madison Cawthorn for their role in the January 6th insurrection, we see that there is definitely a line to be drawn between what constitutes actual support, whether there's purely verbal support that is needed, or if one was actually material support of an insurrection to be implicated under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
The Section 3 of the 14th, go ahead.
No, you.
Section 3 of the 14th Amendment also deliberates that, as we see with current times, as the January 6th committee investigating these determinants and individuals who were involved with the process, from going on to how they supplied or maybe advanced the individuals who were part of the rebellion, to also institute, as we've seen with the representative of Georgia, that the individuals themselves of these states are refuting against their leaders in their states, which could be deliberated how the effects of the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment plays into part.
Put yourself in the shoes of the most radical of the demonstrators on January 6th. How do you suppose they were going to justify their behavior to their children or their grandchildren?
Oh, quite frankly.
Lindsay. Sorry.
Quite frankly, we hold that rebellions or insurrections are justified when natural rights are being infringed upon. And we see that with January 6th. There are two forces to this discussion. One is the actual participants of January 6th, which would naturally explain to their kids and grandchildren that because they thought that their natural right to vote was being infringed upon, their actions in storming the United States Capitol building and instigating a rebellion was legitimized. However, if you weren't a part of the January 6th or did not believe that the election was quote unquote stolen, then you'd naturally believe that the natural rights of the people protested in January 6th was not being infringed, and therefore their right to protest was illegitimate.
More specifically, in the days preceding January 6th, and in an actual speech delivered by former President Donald Trump, the legal theory was advanced that former Vice President Mike Pence could in fact overturn the election, but under the Electoral Count Act by decertifying certain electors. Those that participated in the insurrection on January 6th could attempt to justify to their grandchildren that they believed that they had an actual legal mechanism fighting to save democracy, even if they did not go through the proper process of searching for the facts that would have led them to see that this was not an actual proper avenue.
However, we see on the outlook of the individuals who experience maybe on news journalism or broadcasting, such as ourselves, who hasn't directly been in January 6th. However, we observe the outside part of January 6th. Maybe we would have told our grandchildren or our children as a whole that we perceive this to be an illegitimate rebellion because we've seen that the actual factual parts that the January 6th insurrections believed were to be factual were indeed false. Going on to the catering of featuring to the majority not believing that this was a true event.
Lindsay, are you interested in asking you can't speak? Okay.
I missed their presentation. I don't think it would be appropriate.
Well, why don't you go ahead and ask your question, though? You might be interested in their answer.
Well, one of the things that I would have wanted to hear from you, and I apologize if you covered it, how do you keep misinformation from generating the kinds of responses so that citizens believe they are acting in legitimate defense of the government? How do we do that?
Misinformation as a whole, especially in the polarized political climate today, can be derived from the private sectors themselves, as we've seen with a lot of accessibility in social media outlets such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and several of the January 6th insurrectionists using these outlets to even cure live streams during the event. It can be used to maybe censor some of the information that is being spread, especially when we see with COVID-19 pandemic, the disinformation spread in regards to vaccine mishandling or certain unhealth attributes that can harm the overall population of the United States can also be derived as well.
However, any government censorship of misinformation has to be taken lightly. While living in Turkey, I saw the dangers of censorship of misinformation with Instagram and Wikipedia both being blocked for prolonged periods of time. Therefore, the U.S. government, if it does choose to censor information, should apply the Brandenburg test from Brandenburg v. Ohio, that any misinformation is likely to promote imminent lawlessness, and that this lawlessness is likely. Even further, it could consider adopting a version of the Miller test from Miller v. California, which originally is used for obscene information, whether or not the average citizen will believe the information to be misinformation, and whether or not it has any cultural value beyond its sheer presence as misinformation.
I disagree with the notion that the government should censor information, and instead the government should seek to educate citizens either through civic education. We see the dangers with censorship in two Feller's papers, Feller's 10 and Feller's 51, both written by Madison. In Feller's 10, Madison tells us that to take away faction away from darkseid would be akin to taking away oxygen away from a flame. And in Feller's 51, Madison tells us that ambition must be used to counteract ambition.
When and if should free speech be limited by government?
Free speech should be limited by a government during emergency times, as we've seen in war times, particularly in World War II, when individuals were deprived of their freedom of speech for certain cases in regards to journalism outlets and also broadcasting outlets. And in COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen that certain limits of free speech were going on in procurement to quarantine measures, and some individuals rebelling such an anti-vax and anti-mask protests.
However, free speech also plays an important role in our political discourse. Chief Justice Hughes wrote in a decision that one must maintain the freedom of assembly, so that to maintain free political discussions, that the government can remain responsive to the will of the people, and that change, if it is desirable, is achieved through peaceful means.
To echo my colleague, sorry.
That's okay. Under what circumstances, if any, do you think participants of the events of January 6th should be held accountable under the law? What do you think of the current state of accountability at the moment?
We currently see that there has been no prolonged action to prosecute members of January 6th after the initial group were being prosecuted, notably QAnon, Shaman, and other more radical followers, more notable followers. In such times of polarization, the federal government should tread lightly on whether or not to prosecute these members, as if we do prosecute such members, it might lead to increased polarization in society and incite more riots with people aligning with the January 6th movement across the nation.
For example, the New York Times recently reported that Attorney General Merrick Garland is receiving increased political pressure to increase the pace and aggressiveness at which prosecutions of those responsible at January 6th are convicted. However, to my colleague Isaac's point, is that this should not be framed as persecution of a political opponent, but rather protecting democracy when one prosecutes individuals, such as under Section 42 USC 2383, such that we do not increase political polarization within the United States and potentially set the stage for another event like January 6th.
What are the alternatives to rebellion to abolish or alter government?
Can you please repeat that question?
What are the alternatives to rebellion to abolish or alter government?
One form of other discrete ways against rebellion could be peaceful protests. I myself was one of the organizers of the Stop Asian Hate protests regarding in Seattle, and what we used through the protests in regards to local governments was we shifted the agenda around local governments acknowledging AAPI heritage and also xenophobic behavior. Along with the Stop Asian Hate rally, we've seen that the regression from the Biden administration going on to declaration the AAPI Heritage Month being declared as a national holiday as well.
Henry David Thoreau advocated in his essay Civil Disobedience, the eponymous civil disobedience, saying that by withdrawing support for government, such as by not paying taxes, one could seek to reform a government that one morally objected to. Martin Luther King Jr. expanded on this concept in a letter from Birmingham jail, saying that it was a universal principle that should be applied in order to achieve one's aims, while not alienating the community. Through civil disobedience, one can pressure one's community in order and create such tensions that negotiation is inevitable and thus create changes without resorting to violence.
I disagree with both my colleagues. If the question was to abolish the government, and peaceful protests and petitions simply cannot do that. I saw this firsthand in my time in Hong Kong. I may finish my thought.
Please finish your sentence.
Thank you so much. I saw this firsthand in my time in Hong Kong. With the Hong Kong government suspending many civil rights, we saw that peaceful protests would only be reacted to with live bullets and with violence against the protesters. Therefore, I believe that only rebellion and insurrection is the only way to abolish a government that is an enemy to the people. Thank you.
Wow, great job. Thank you, and thank you very much for putting up with poor Judge Draper. Would have been real happy to hear that, I'm sure.
Let me just start, because this would have been the one where I would have started the comments, and I'll make them real brief since I didn't hear everything. I am so sorry, by the way, and apparently a car hit a power pole.
Oh, great.
And that knocked, anyway, there was a lot that happened. I found out. But I'm so sorry. What I heard, I enjoyed. Would have loved to chat it with you about the difference in the way Black Lives Matter marches got treated in Washington and the way the people on January 6th did, and whether I think the National Guard would have been out there, but didn't get to talk to you about that. Good luck.
Well, Steve?
Good. I enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was a clever, presentation in terms of passing off the ideas from one person to the next. I thought that was very effective, finishing each other's sentences. I thought that only my wife did that, but You were very timely. You had good examples, and you were up to date in terms of what's going on. I like the fact that you brought in the limits in terms of free speech. I thought you did an effective job in terms of dealing with those also. And you were willing to take a stand on when civil disobedience was justified or not justified, which is good. We may not all agree, but you took a stand and backed it up.
Great. Yes, I thought you did a lovely job. I'm very sorry that we didn't have another 10 minutes to talk with you. I'd have loved to have heard more about your feelings about Hong Kong. I'm glad you got in a little something there at the last second. That would have been interesting to hear. It really was a lovely job, and under confusion is even more impressive. So thank you. I hope you've had a really good time doing this. You clearly have understood what you're dealing with and have bitten this experience, taken it into your heart. You all obviously have done a great deal of homework. And I hope that you will, I don't know whether any of you are intending to try to become citizens, so maybe whether or not you vote is a question still for you. But for the rest of us, the fact that you have learned as much as you have, I'm sure you will be a great influence on your friends and people around you to do what you can to educate them and encourage them to educate themselves before they go out and vote. And I hope you will find yourselves involved in some fashion of political science or this study down the road. Whether or not you're a citizen, I don't think matters as much to work for various governments. And we need people who know what they're talking about. And thank you. You've made me proud. I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.